The portal's open. We already know some names that are in the portal. We'll learn of more names that'll enter the transfer portal. Here are two that are going to start at Power 4 institutions next year. Let's start with Tre'Quon Fegans. So Tre'Quon Fegans was a class of 2022 recruit, began his career at the University of Alabama, then didn't do a whole heck of a lot there. He went to USC this past offseason, and he's in the transfer portal again. USC's had a couple of defensive defections on that side of the ball because they've brought in significant talent on that side of the ball. I've said many times, I really like what USC has done in the transfer portal this offseason. Bet them over 7.5 while you can. Anyway, Tre'Quon Fegans is a guy that was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school. He's got a brother who I'll talk about in a moment, but this guy's going to end up in the SEC. I don't see any other dots in which I could connect that lead me to think that Fegans will end up anywhere other than playing in the SEC. He's a native of the state of Alabama. He was once upon a time playing for the University of Alabama. Now, I've heard that Auburn could be in the mix here. Nothing is solidified. You'd have to put Alabama in the mix. You absolutely would, for 3 reasons. Number one, he knows what it's like to be there, and he left in theory because of playing time, but you got a new staff, you got new defensive coaches over there. Number two, he is from the state of Alabama, so if he wants to go home, there are, last time I checked, 2 SEC schools in that state that you could go play for, Auburn or Alabama. And number 3 is his teammate from this past season, Damani Jackson, has already transferred to the Crimson Tide. That's a trifecta of factors in which you could see the stars aligning for Tre'Quon Fegans to end up with Alabama. But is Auburn going to be in the mix? Sure. Because maybe he left Alabama because he decided, you know what, this is just not the school for me. I'm not about the Scarlet A. I don't like the colors. I doubt that's the actual reason there. But this is a guy who physically has got the tools and needs the opportunity to showcase what he's capable of. Hasn't fully been given that. He played for USC this past year. He registered 9 total tackles, and that was just not a great defensive staff. I don't blame him for wanting a better or a different situation at the very least. But the Damani Jackson element is interesting because those guys were playing together this past season. Maybe he wants to follow his teammate to go be a member of the Crimson Tide. But Hugh Freeze has been very open about the fact that the defensive line is going to be an emphasis for them in the transfer portal, that they want to go and get sorts of players, all sorts of players there. Do you think if someone comes available in the secondary who he feels is a starting caliber guy, he's just going to turn him away? No, I don't think so. I don't think Auburn's transfer portal desires are limited to the defensive line. That's just where Hugh Freeze said the focus is going to be. So here's the other interesting component. Tre'Quon Fegans is his younger brother. He's a very highly rated 4-star safety in the class of 2025. He's got all sorts of SEC offers. Could those 2 guys be a package deal? I've seen crazier things happen before where one guy would commit via the portal now and you get a guarantee that his brother shows up in the future. Remember, this is the player empowerment era where players oftentimes go into the transfer portal and say, hey, what can you do for me? Not what can I do for you? I'm just saying. I throw it out there. Here's another SEC school. And again, all these reasons are why I'm saying this guy's going to go play in the SEC and he's going to go start somewhere. He just needs the opportunity to do so. Do you know who recruited him originally to the University of Alabama? I couldn't possibly expect you to know that. That would be an unreasonable expectation on my part for you to know who recruited Tre'Quon Fegans out of high school and got him originally to commit to the University of Alabama, which, by the way, historically, Nick Saban and defensive backs, there's a little bit of a track record there of him doing very well. So if Nick Saban was after a blue chip DB recruit, yeah, I think there's plenty of potential in that individual player. But the guy who recruited him is Travaris Robinson. Do you know where he's at now? Do you know who that is? He was on Nick Saban's staff for quite a while. Saban retires, and Robinson goes to, drum roll please, the University of Georgia. So when I think about where Fegans could end up and where his brother could end up as a result. Certainly that's a bargaining chip in the recruiting world. I mean, this is a two birds with one stone sort of situation. If you land the older brother and you end up getting the younger brother, well, suddenly you've got a bunch of talented DBs, or at least two, in your defensive backfield. And these are places, particularly Alabama and Georgia, that have placed a pretty high priority and churned out a lot of NFL talent in their secondaries. So those are the schools that I would watch for. Auburn is a name to watch. Alabama is a name to watch. Georgia, with the Travaris Robinson connection, that is a name to watch as well. Let's go to player number 2 in this particular segment. Philip Blidi has been around college football for a long time. A very, very long time, some would say. He was at Indiana this past year. Before that, he was at Texas Tech. Do you know how long he's been in college football? This is year 5. He's one of those guys. They're fewer and further between than they used to be once upon a time. But this is a guy who has got another year of eligibility. His 5th year playing along the defensive line, you don't find guys like that. And I think that's a particularly strong advantage when you're dealing with someone in the trenches. Because you've got that extra year, whereas other guys do not. Or if you're going up against true freshmen or redshirt sophomores, whomever you're battling out there on the offensive and defensive line. He's a defensive lineman himself. He's had 5 years now to be in a college weight room. That's a long time to build yourself up. You are as physically mature as you can possibly be. Now, is he the highest end talent you could possibly find in college football? Perhaps not. Or he'd probably be going to the NFL draft. But how many times do you find a 5th year defensive lineman who's only been at Power 4 institutions? He began his career at Texas Tech. He transferred to Indiana, and he's got quite the offer list. That time that he has spent playing the sport has drawn some eyeballs here. So here's a list of visits that he has taken or is planning to take. Auburn, once again, on the list. No surprise, because Hugh Freeze has said very openly, we want defensive linemen in the transfer portal. So no surprise, he's going after Philip Blidi here. Washington, a position I talked about, or a school rather, that I talked about on yesterday's show. They need help all over the place, including, but not limited to, the defensive line. And I think Washington and Alabama, as I discussed to begin yesterday's show, could be very active in this spring transfer portal window. Amongst the kind of big names, heavy hitters on the recruiting trail in this spring transfer portal window, I think Alabama and Washington could be major players, especially the Crimson Tide. But he's visited Washington, Auburn, LSU, and he's expected to get out to Oklahoma this week for the spring game. Well, that's a pretty loaded lineup of visitors right there. Whether or not the NFL has interest in him at a high level, he's clearly someone who, it appears, would want to go somewhere where he can up his draft stock. Are all those places, locations in which you can do that? Yeah, they absolutely are. So these are two guys who we know are going to be in the transfer portal. Tre'Quon Fegans, Philip Blidi. Remember those names because they're going to pop out of the portal and they're going to end up, in all likelihood, in the SEC. Names to keep an eye on. The transfer portal, it be wildin', and it's only going to get, they say, crazier. We shall see. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.